Okay, evening guys. I just wanted to do a little vid tonight on some figure work. Now, what we in the past, I've spoken about figures, and one or two guys have actually asked me about figures, and I'm not a pro by any means when it comes to figure work. Like with anything else with my modeling, it's done on a budget. Okay, that's why this is known as the budget channel. Now, I've always been intrigued by doing figures. Always had a thing that the figures need to be a certain look. I've always gone for the old Verlinden look. Those of you who are familiar with the Verlinden products, Francois Verlinden, he is a famous diorama and modeler, and obviously he had a lot of products that he brought out. Now, he also brought out figures that you could buy, and I was always after these figures, but back in the day, they were a little bit above my pay grade. So I love getting the old figures, and I must admit the newer figures today, your newer Tamiya figures, you've got Masterbox, you've got all different brands, and but I like the older ones. They value for money, and they're good to practice on. But one thing I've learned about figures, when you've got the figure that or the parts or the parts that you cut off, that you are keen now to put together and make a figure, the painting is the most exciting part, obviously. But when it comes to figure work, and more so than anything else, is that the preparation, the cleaning of the figure. And a lot of guys say, oh, I don't wash my figures, or I don't wash them down in any detergent, I just put a primer on. No, that's all good and well. I mean, but I find a process that I like to work with, and is that once I've cut them off the sprue, or I've hacked a figure to get certain pose, and I also like scratch building a figure and using old parts and making my own poses. But that's for another video. But for this purpose, you've always got to remember, you've got to have a fair idea of what the uniform or the figure that you're working around, what the uniform looks like. So research is important, extremely important. A lot of guys just build what they call just build for fun, but that's fine. It's fine. But I like to be as correct as possible. There are a lot of people out there that would call that a rivet counter, but that's fine. And in the same process, I'm having fun, and it's always nice to have a story behind a build. So I like to do a lot of research and find out what I'm doing. At the moment, what I'm busy with, and some of you might have seen on my Facebook group called the War Room Groepe, and there I've started on a little vignette about a German sniper team. So interestingly enough, I had to hack a few figures together to get the pose, but that's fine. As I said in another video, the most important thing, and we'll get right into it right now, about the figures is actually cleaning it. And one needs to know about the uniform, where the seams are, where there are not seams, how a uniform fits around the waistband, etc, etc, etc. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to get you down here, and then I'm going to just show you briefly how it works. So let's take the torso for argument's sake. If you've got the torso, I just want to raise this a little bit here, just up a little bit like that. If you've got the torso, let me just get something, let's just put that over there, then we got a bit more, that's it. Now if you get the torso, let's just get some more light on here. If you get the torso, and if you look at the torso, especially around where the arms join, you will find a lot of flash, as they call it, where it's been molded. That you must gently scrape off, and I like to use a sharp crafting knife. I've got this nice one, crafting knife. So you need to gently scrape that off the edges, and if you look where the seam goes down, you guys can zoom in where the molding seam goes into the clothing here, you got to gently scrape that off and get it off like that, and you'll see it'll come off in what's the name. And then what I like to do is at the end, once I've done, then I take a very fine grit, 1200 grit water paper, and I rub it over there. Now especially on the torso where it's going to fit onto the legs, etc., you must get that nice and clean. That must be cleaned up nicely. Now here's a perfect example of a bad where the joint that there must come out, that you don't, so that you got to cut off gently, and you just go down there and you just get that off like that. Okay, get that off nice and gently, so you got no seam line, unnatural seam line. And this is caused by when the styrene figure is gone into the injection mold, and they then mold this figure. So that's got to be cleaned off. You get that nicely cleaned off there without damaging any of the natural folds of the actual. Then you'll see on this side it goes off, and we get that off nicely as well. Scrape that off nicely, as you can see it there. You get that nicely off, and around the neck here where his scarf now of this particular figure, this is the spotter I'm working on the sniper spotter. Get that piece of plastic off there, and we get this nice and clean like that. Okay, and you work around. Now you slowly work around. Now you'll take here on the arm, you see there's a nice seam there. You got to scrape that off nicely, guys. You've got to clean that off, otherwise that's going to look terrible. You do this, all this nice work, and you paint this figure beautifully, and at the end of the day you've got this horrible looking seam. And then one step further, guys will spend hours like myself now, and you clean up the uniform like this so nicely there where it was joined onto the sprue. You clean that nicely, get in the folds there, clean that all out. You can see the styrene coming off. You slowly clean that up. Then once they've done all that, then the actual hand itself, if you can see the hand, then they'll paint and they'll leave that there, leave that piece sticking out there, and it looks absolutely terrible. Once a nicely figure done, and then all of a sudden you see the seam on a hand. I mean, we all know that a human hand has got no seam on it as such. So we need to cut this off the end of the fingers like that, and get that as smooth as possible. And then what I do is I actually go one step further. I actually just get the knife in between the fingers, so there's definitely a separation there, because obviously your fingers are not joined. So you get a nice little separation, and then they round it on the end like that. And even go in between the thumb here, guys, folks. You just go in like that, and you clean that out. Okay, if you can look in there, you get that little blade, that hook in there, and you get that out. Be careful not to cut the thumb off. And then what I also do is I then rub some sandpaper in there and just file that off. So you've got to get that nicely in and nicely cleaned up like that. Okay, folks, and so you go on, and you go on with the legs, etc., 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 and you clean them up like that. Right, it's a slow process, but it's an absolutely necessary process. It's got to be done. Otherwise, if you don't do it, and guess what? You can carry on with that slow process, and lots of cup of java that goes with it as well. So anyway, just a short video, just to get introduction to how I treat my figures. I'll make another video once I get to the point where I start joining the torso, start putting filler in. But this is just the cleaning. The cleaning process is the most tiresome process, but it has to be done. If you don't do it properly and don't get it nicely clean, you're not going to get a good paint job. Okay, folks, you stay solid out there. Keep modeling. Take your time. Be patient. Okay, till next time.